The late afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, casting long, lazy stripes of gold across the polished quartz countertop. It was the kind of quiet Tuesday that felt suspended in time, thick with the scent of brewing coffee and unspoken things. Chloe sat perched on a stool, swirling a spoon in her mug, the ceramic cool against her fingers. Across from her, her younger sister, Megan, was scrolling through her phone, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "You're just saying that because you had a bad day at work," Megan said, not looking up. Chloe let out a sigh that was far more dramatic than the situation warranted. It was a habit of hers, amplifying small frustrations into grand tragedies. It was how she navigated the world, how she commanded its attention. "It's not just work, Meg, it's everything. The monotony. It grinds you down, you know?" The conversation was a familiar one, a well-worn path they often trod. Chloe would vent, and Megan would offer a sympathetic ear, a validating nod. It was their ritual. But today, the air felt different, charged with a restless energy that coiled inside Chloe's chest. She felt a reckless impulse, a desire to say something sharp and definitive, something to shatter the placid afternoon. "I was thinking about it the other day," Chloe began, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "About how life turns out, the choices you make." She paused, looking at Megan to ensure she had her full attention. Megan, sensing the shift in tone, put her phone down. "If I had to do it all over again," Chloe said, the words slipping out with a shocking ease, "I probably wouldn't marry Liam." The sentence hung in the air between them, shimmering with a terrible power. She'd said it so flippantly, as if discussing a regrettable fashion choice from a decade ago, not the man she had promised her life to. The man who was, she assumed, in the living room, decompressing from his own day at work with the quiet hum of his phone. Megan's eyes widened slightly. "Chloe, you don't mean that." "Don't I?" Chloe laughed, a brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe I was just bored. Maybe I wanted a different kind of adventure. He's a good man, of course. He's stable. He's Liam. But sometimes I wonder." It wasn't the truth, not the whole truth anyway. It was a sliver of a fleeting, selfish thought that she had plucked from the darkness and given voice to, simply for the effect. She was about to double down, to spin a more elaborate tale of youthful dreams unfulfilled, when a profound silence fell over the room. It wasn't Megan's silence. Megan was still staring, mouth agape. This was a different kind of quiet. It was heavy, weighted. It felt as if the air itself had been sucked out of the kitchen. Slowly, almost against her will, Chloe turned her head, and there he was. Liam stood in the doorway, framed by the white molding like a figure in a somber portrait. His shoulders were slumped slightly from his day as a civil engineer, his keys still dangling from his index finger. But it was his face that stole the air from Chloe's lungs. It was utterly blank. There was no anger, no shock, no pain. There was nothing. It was a terrifying void, a smooth, unreadable mask where the husband she knew should have been. He didn't speak. He didn't demand an explanation. He didn't even seem to breathe. His gaze met hers for a single, searing second, and in that moment, Chloe felt a cold dread snake its way up her spine. Then, as quietly as he had appeared, he turned and walked away. A few seconds later, the soft, final click of the front door closing echoed through the house. The sound was definitive. It wasn't a slam of anger. It was the sound of a departure. "Oh my God," Megan whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "He heard you." Chloe stared at the empty doorway, her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt a strange mix of emotions, a flicker of guilt, quickly extinguished by a surge of defensive anger. He'd been eavesdropping. This was his fault, too. "He'll be fine," she said, forcing another laugh, this one even more hollow than the last. "He's just being dramatic." But even as she said it, the image of his blank face was burned into her mind. Liam wasn't the dramatic one. He was the calm one, the patient anchor to her storm. And he had just walked out without a single word. The quiet click of the door felt louder and more ominous than any shout ever could. The first hour of Liam's absence was filled with a defiant, simmering anger. Chloe cleaned the kitchen with a clatter of unnecessary force, slamming cabinet doors and scrubbing the counter as if trying to erase the memory of his face. She narrated her indignation to Megan, who had the good sense to remain mostly silent. "How dare he just walk out?" Chloe fumed, her voice echoing in the now too quiet house. Like a child. We're adults. If he has a problem, he should stay and talk about it. Olive. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and orange, the anger began to curdle into a different feeling. It was a low, thrumming anxiety she couldn't quite name. The silence in the house grew louder with each passing minute. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator, seemed to amplify the empty space he had left behind. She finally broke and called his phone. It rang 4 times before clicking over to voicemail. Liam, it's me. Are you okay? Call me. She hung up, annoyed at the tremor of weakness in her own voice. She followed up with a text. You okay? No response. Fine, she thought, throwing her phone onto the sofa. If he wants to pout, let him pout. I am not going to beg. She ordered takeout. Something greasy and comforting she and Liam rarely ate. She put on a loud, mindless reality show, turning the volume up to fill the void. But his absence was a physical presence. She saw him everywhere. In the indentation on his side of the couch, in the book-left face, down on the coffee table, in the pair of worn-out sneakers he always kicked off by the door. By 10 o'clock, the anxiety had morphed into a strange cocktail of panic and fury. Where was he? Was he trying to teach her a lesson? The thought was infuriating. She wasn't a student to be disciplined. She was his wife. But a darker thought crept in, unbidden. What if he wasn't just mad? What if something had happened? She quickly pushed the thought away. Liam was the most predictable, responsible person she knew. He wasn't reckless. She stayed up until well after midnight, scrolling through social media, the blue light of her phone illuminating her tense face. She was pretending not to wait, but every shadow that moved outside the window, every distant sound of a car engine, made her heart leap into her throat. He didn't come back. When she finally went to bed, exhaustion warring with her stubborn pride, she was more annoyed than anything else. She told herself he'd be back when he was ready, that she wasn't going to lose sleep over it. Spoiler alert! She totally did. She tossed and turned in the vast emptiness of their king-sized bed, the cool, undisturbed sheets on his side feeling like a reproach. The next morning, the reality of the situation hit her with the force of a physical blow. His side of the bed was still pristine. His toothbrush was still in its holder, a lonely sentinel in the bathroom. The silence of the morning, usually filled with the sound of his electric razor and the quiet patting of his feet, was absolute. It wasn't that he had packed a bag and left for good. All his things were still here. But he was gone. And the not knowing was a torment. She texted him again, her thumbs fumbling on the screen. Where are you? Can we please talk? Still nothing. The single word delivered under her message felt like a mockery. At this point, the worry began to eclipse the anger. Not a worry born of guilt, but a worry born of being ignored. Chloe did not handle the silent treatment well. She was a creature of noise, of confrontation, of hashing things out until a resolution was reached, usually in her favor. Liam was the opposite. He was a simmer and let cool kind of guy, and it drove her insane. She called Megan. He's still not back. Maybe you should apologize, Megan suggested, her voice gentle. The suggestion was like a spark to gasoline. Apologize for what? Chloe snapped. For being honest? For having a feeling in a private conversation he shouldn't have been listening to in the first place? The words felt flimsy and false even as they left her mouth. She was trying to convince herself more than her sister. By the end of the second day, she was genuinely irritated, but a new, cold fear was beginning to seep into the cracks of her bravado. This was more than Liam being sensitive. This was a deliberate, calculated withdrawal. Who does he think he is, making her stress out like this? If he had a problem, he should have stayed and faced her like a man. Okay, maybe I am the bad guy, she admitted to herself for a fleeting second, staring at her own reflection in the dark screen of the television. But still, it wasn't like she'd said anything that wasn't true, was it? Sometimes she did wonder if she'd be happier if they'd never gotten together. But that wasn't the same as saying she didn't love him. Right? She had always taken his steadfastness for granted, his quiet acceptance of her moods and her whims. He was the sturdy oak, and she was the wild vine that wrapped around him. She had always assumed he would be there, solid and unmoving, no matter how hard she pulled. Now, for the first time in their decade together, she wasn't so sure. The silence in the house was no longer just an absence of sound, it was the sound of a foundation cracking. The third day dawned gray and oppressive, mirroring the mood inside the house. The initial storm of Chloe's anger and anxiety had settled into a heavy, suffocating fog of dread. Liam was still gone. Not a word, not a sign. The silence from his end was no longer passive. It felt active, a wall he had deliberately constructed between them. Her irritation was now almost entirely consumed by a raw, gnawing fear. Who just vanishes? Who leaves their wife in a state of suspended agony without a single word of reassurance? It was immature. It was cruel. But as she sat at the kitchen counter, staring at his empty coffee mug, a thought pierced through her defenses, sharp and terrifying. What if he was really done this time? It was a thought she had flirted with in anger, but now it felt chillingly real. Liam didn't play games. If he was gone, there was a reason, and maybe, just maybe, it was a reason far bigger than she was willing to admit. Around noon, she couldn't take it anymore. The passive waiting was eating her alive. She needed to do something. She called his mother, her voice tight with forced nonchalance. "Hey, just wondering if you've heard from Liam. We had a silly tiff, and he's being a bit dramatic." "No, dear, I haven't," his mother replied, a note of concern in her voice. "Is everything all right?" Fine, just Liam being Liam." Chloe lied, ending the call quickly before her facade could crumble. The fact that he hadn't gone to his mother, his usual port in any storm, sent a fresh wave of panic through her. She tried a few of his friends. Their responses were a mixture of genuine surprise and poorly concealed curiosity. One of them, Mark, asked, "Everything okay with you two?" And she had to bite back the urge to scream at him. Defeated, she grabbed her car keys. She drove around for an hour, a aimless, desperate pilgrimage through their shared life. She passed the park where he'd proposed, the small Italian restaurant from their first date, the movie theater they frequented. He was nowhere. He wasn't the type to hang out at bars or crash on a friend's couch without notice. He was steady, predictable Liam. So where in the hell was he? When she returned home, the empty house felt more hostile than ever. His toothbrush, his shoes, his book on the nightstand, they were like ghosts, silent accusers reminding her of his absence. She stood in the kitchen, staring at the front door, willing it to open, but it remained stubbornly shut. The feeling of powerlessness was suffocating. She needed information. She needed to feel like she was doing something, anything, other than disintegrating in this silent house. On a desperate impulse, she opened her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard to their joint bank account website. She scrolled through recent transactions, half hoping, half dreading to find a clue, and then she saw it. A charge from the previous day. Not a bar tab, not a gas station receipt from another town. It was a charge for the Hotel Hudson, a boutique hotel downtown, known for its discreet upscale clientele. The sight of it sent a dizzying wave of conflicting emotions through her. Relief, sharp and immediate, that he was alive and safe, followed instantly by a white-hot surge of fury. He wasn't with his mother or a friend or, God forbid, someone else. He was at a hotel, alone, hiding out, avoiding her, treating her like she wasn't even worth a conversation. The audacity of it. The nerve. Without a second thought, she snatched her phone and dialed the hotel's number, her fingers trembling with rage. She didn't even know what she planned to say, but it didn't matter. "Hotel Hudson, how may I help you?" A saccharine sweet voice answered. "I need to be connected to the room of Liam Peterson," Chloe said, her voice clipped. "One moment." There was a pause filled with the soft clicks of a keyboard. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't have a guest registered under that name. Try Chloe Peterson. Or maybe he paid cash. He's my husband. He checked in yesterday." "I'm sorry, ma'am," the voice repeated, the politeness now sounding like a weapon. "For the privacy and security of our guests, I cannot disclose any information about who is or is not staying with us." "He is my husband," Chloe snapped, her control finally shattering. "I know he's there. I saw the charge. I understand your frustration, ma'am, but it is our policy." Chloe hung up, a strangled sob of fury escaping her throat. She stared at her phone, defeated. She started typing a text to Liam, her thumbs flying in a rage. "I know where you are. Can you just stop being a coward and come home?" She stared at the words, the venom in them palpable even on the small screen. With a shuddering breath, she deleted the entire message. If he wanted to act like this, fine. She wouldn't beg. She wouldn't stoop to that level. But the bravado was gone. The knot in her stomach wasn't anger anymore. As she sat in her car in the driveway, staring at the sterile facade of the hotel's website on her phone, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Fear. Cold, unadulterated fear. What if he wasn't coming back? What if she had truly irrevocably pushed him too far? And what if, deep down, she knew this wasn't just about the words she'd said to Megan? This was the culmination of 1,000 tiny cuts, 1,000 moments of dismissiveness, 1,000 times she had put her own feelings ahead of his. Maybe this time he'd finally had enough. And for the first time, she wasn't sure she could talk her way out of this mess. The waiting ended late that evening. Chloe was curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that failed to ward off the chill in the air, when she heard the sound she had been both dreading and longing for, the quiet turn of a key in the front door. The door opened, and there he was. He didn't slam it shut or toss his keys onto the console table with a clatter, the way she might have done in his place. He stepped inside and closed the door with a soft, deliberate click. He walked in calmly, almost too calmly, and set a small overnight bag down by the couch. The blank, unreadable expression was back, and it unnerved her more than any display of anger would have. She had braced herself for a fight, for accusations, for tears. This composed stranger was far worse. He stood there for a moment, just looking at her, as if trying to decide where to begin. For a terrifying second, she thought he might just walk past her and go upstairs without a word. "We need to talk," he said finally. His voice was steady, but it was stripped of all its usual warmth. It was cold, flat, and unfamiliar. "Yeah, no kidding," Chloe shot back, her own voice sharp with a mixture of relief and resentment. She uncurled from the couch but remained standing, leaning against the kitchen counter, folding her arms across her chest. It was a defensive posture, a suit of armor she instinctively donned. She knew she should be the one to apologize, but she couldn't. Admitting she was wrong felt like ceding power, and she wasn't ready to surrender. "Are you going to explain why you ghosted me for 3 days?" she demanded, trying to sound casual, but the edge in her voice was unmistakable. Liam sighed, a weary sound that seemed to come from deep within his soul. He sat down on the edge of the armchair, rubbing his hands together. "I needed space, Chloe. To think. To figure out how to even talk to you after what I heard. All day." She rolled her eyes, a gesture of pure, reflexive dismissal. "Oh, come on, Liam. Are we really going to do this? You overheard one thing. One thing that I said in private to my sister, and now you're acting like it's the end of the world." "It wasn't just one thing, Chloe," he said, and for the first time his voice rose slightly before he reined it back in. "You said you wouldn't marry me now. That if you could go back, you wouldn't choose me. Do you have any idea what that feels like to hear?" "Well, maybe I wouldn't," she retorted, the words lashing out before she could stop them. They hung in the air, toxic and shimmering. She saw a flicker of something real hurt in his eyes, but instead of backing down, she doubled down, plowing forward on a wave of self-righteous fury. "You've changed, Liam. We both know it. You're not the same guy I married." She hesitated, searching for the cruelest words. "You're lazier now, okay? You've let yourself go. You don't even try anymore. Can you really blame me for feeling like this?" He just looked at her, and the raw pain in his eyes was so profound it almost made her flinch. But instead of getting angry, he just nodded slowly, as if she were confirming something he had already concluded. "So that's it," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "You think I'm fat and lazy, and that's why you'd rather not be with me." "Don't twist my words," she snapped, feeling a hot flush of shame creep up her neck. "I didn't say I didn't want to be with you. I said if I could go back, I might have made a different choice. That's not the same thing." "It sounds exactly the same to me," he replied, his voice firm. "And you know what? Maybe you're right. I have changed. I've gotten older. I've gained some weight. I've gotten comfortable. But that's what happens when you're married, Chloe. You build a life together. Or at least, that's what I thought we were doing." "Don't make this about me," she cried, her voice rising. "You think I don't notice how distant you've been? How you barely talk to me anymore unless it's about work or bills? You're not exactly giving me a reason to feel excited about this marriage, Liam." He stared at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. "So, this is my fault now? I'm the reason you're unhappy? I'm the reason you don't respect me enough to keep a conversation like that private? She threw her hands up in frustration. You're twisting everything. I'm just saying maybe if you put in a little more effort, worked out, showed some interest in me like you used to, I wouldn't feel this way. He was silent for a long moment. Then he did something she didn't expect. He stood up slowly, deliberately, and looked her straight in the eye. The blankness was gone, replaced by a calm, piercing clarity. You know what, Chloe? He said, his voice dangerously steady. I think this says a lot more about you than it does about me. A surge of panic shot through her. What's that supposed to mean? It means, he said, each word a carefully placed stone, that you don't see what you have. You have someone who has been here for you, through all of your impulsive decisions, your spending habits, your constant need for drama, someone who has never judged you for any of it. And instead of appreciating that, you look for reasons to tear me down. She opened her mouth to argue, but he held up a hand. He wasn't finished. I know I'm not perfect. I know I've changed. But so have you, Chloe, and not in a way that makes this marriage easier. You've become someone who refuses to take accountability, someone who lashes out instead of having a real conversation, someone who would rather blame me for letting myself go than look in the mirror and ask why you feel the need to belittle the person who loves you most. His words hit her like a physical slap. But reflexively, she lashed out one last time. Oh, so now you're the perfect saint who's been holding this marriage together. He shook his head, a sad, final gesture. He bent down and picked up his bag. I'm not perfect. But at least I'm trying to be better. And I am done standing here and letting you make me feel like I'm not enough. He looked at her, his eyes full of a sorrow that was deeper than anger. If you can't see the value in me anymore, Chloe, then maybe we need to take a step back. He turned and walked toward the door. What are you saying? She whispered, her throat tight. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. I'm saying I need more than this, he said, gesturing between them. And if you're not willing to work on it, then maybe I shouldn't be here anymore. He didn't yell. He didn't slam the door. He just walked out, leaving her standing alone in the deafening silence, stunned, shattered, and more confused than ever. The weeks that followed were a study in emptiness. Liam did not come back. The house, once a home, became a hollow shell that echoed with his absence. Every room held a ghost of him. His favorite mug in the cupboard, his worn-out armchair, the faint scent of his aftershave that lingered in the closet, each was a small, sharp reminder of what she had so carelessly broken. Reality hit her not like a wave, but like a slow, rising tide. At first, she maintained a fragile hope, expecting him to call, to text, to eventually cool down and come home as he always did. But this time was different. She started reaching out, sending tentative texts. Hope you're doing okay. The response, when it came hours later, was polite but distant. I'm fine. You too. We need to sort things out, Liam. I know. I'll come by this weekend to grab my things. Grab your things. The phrase was a death knell. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a statement of intent. There was no warmth, no opening for conversation. He wasn't being cruel. He was being clinical. It was clear he was done being vulnerable with her. She dreaded the weekend. When Saturday afternoon arrived, she heard his key in the lock and her stomach clenched. He walked in, and for a moment, she barely recognized him. He stood straighter, his shoulders seemed broader. He had trimmed his beard neatly, giving his jawline a definition she hadn't noticed in years. He was wearing a new, crisp shirt, and he smelled different, of a clean, subtle cologne. He looked better than he had in years, and she hated that she noticed. Hey, she said awkwardly, hovering by the kitchen counter, a stranger in her own home. Hey, he replied, giving her a small, polite nod but avoiding her eyes. He didn't ask how she was. He didn't try to make small talk. He walked straight past her, heading for the bedroom. She heard the sound of cardboard boxes being opened. She followed him, her heart pounding. He was methodically taking his clothes from the closet and folding them into a box. Liam, can we talk? She asked, her voice softer than she'd intended, stripped of its usual bravado. He didn't stop packing. About what, Chloe? About us, she said, stepping closer. He finally paused, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't anger, it was exhaustion. What about us? You made it pretty clear how you feel. I didn't mean it like that, she said quickly, the words tumbling out. I was just upset. I wasn't thinking. Overheard. He shook his head and went back to folding a sweater. No, Chloe. You were thinking. You just didn't think I'd hear it. The lump in her throat grew thick and painful. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, he said firmly, finally turning to face her fully. And it's not just about that one conversation. It's everything. The way you talk to me, the little jabs, the constant criticism, it's like I'm never good enough for you. Tears began to sting her eyes, hot and shameful, but she fought to keep her composure. I was wrong. I know I was. But we can fix this. We've been through worse, right? He let out a small, bitter laugh that held no humor. Have we? Because I don't think we've ever been through this, Chloe. I don't think I've ever felt this disrespected. This. Unwanted. And the worst part is, he continued, his voice laced with a newfound self-awareness, I stayed. I kept trying, even when you made it clear you didn't appreciate me. That's on me. I let it get this far. His words were a punch to the gut because she knew, deep down, they were true. She had wielded his patience like a weapon, and now he was turning it on himself. So that's it? You're just giving up on us? Her voice cracked, and she hated how desperate she sounded. I'm not giving up, he said, his tone steady and resolute. I'm choosing myself. For once, I'm done trying to prove my worth to someone who refuses to see it. She stared at him, her mind reeling. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. He was supposed to break down, to forgive her, to tell her they would figure it out together. But the man standing before her was not the man who had walked out 3 weeks ago. That man had been hurt and confused. This man was calm, resolved, and his decision felt as solid and immovable as bedrock. I can change, she whispered, the words feeling frail in the heavy air. I'll do better. I'll be better. He sighed, setting down the box he was holding. He looked at her, and for the first time, his expression softened with something that looked like pity. Chloe, I hope you do. I really do. Not for me, but for yourself. But I can't be the one who waits around for you to figure it out. I have spent years trying to make you happy, and all I've gotten in return is resentment. I deserve better than that. I deserve better. The words stunned her more than anything else he had said. The tears finally spilled over, tracking hot paths down her cheeks. For once, she didn't try to hide them. I don't want to lose you, she said, her voice breaking completely. Please, Liam, we can fix this. He looked at her for a long, silent moment. She saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a shadow of their shared history, maybe even regret. But it was fleeting. He gave a small, sad shake of his head. I've already lost too much of myself trying to fix this, he said quietly. I can't do it anymore. He picked up the box, his movements deliberate and final. He walked out of the bedroom, not looking back. She heard his footsteps on the stairs, the sound of the front door opening, and then the same quiet, definitive click as it closed behind him. She stood frozen in the middle of the room, surrounded by the empty spaces in the closet and the ghost of his scent. Her heart felt like it was shattering into a million tiny, irreparable pieces. She wanted to chase after him, to scream, to beg him to stay, but she knew it was useless. He was done. And for the first time, she truly understood that she had lost him for good. A month felt like a year. The house remained a silent, cavernous space that Chloe moved through like a ghost. She threw herself into work, went out for drinks with Megan and other friends, and filled her evenings with noise and distraction. But the emptiness followed her, a constant, dull ache in her chest. Liam wasn't just physically gone, he had taken a piece of her with him, the part that had always felt secure, the part that had believed in second chances. One brisk afternoon, seeking a change of scenery, she walked into a coffee shop in a part of town they rarely visited. The air was warm and filled with the rich aroma of roasted beans, and the gentle hum of conversation. She was waiting in line, scrolling absently through her phone, when a laugh cut through the noise. It was a familiar laugh, deep, genuine, and unburdened. Her head snapped up, and there he was. Liam was sitting at a small table by the window, bathed in the soft afternoon light. He was leaning forward, a wide, easy smile on his face. Across from him sat a woman Chloe didn't recognize. She wasn't stunning in a conventional way, but she had a kind of natural, effortless beauty. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, and she was laughing along with him, her eyes sparkling with warmth. He looked happy. No, it was more than that. He looked lighter, more at ease than Chloe had seen him in years. The weary weight that had settled on his shoulders was gone. A primal, ugly emotion clawed its way up Chloe's throat. She wanted to march over there, to slam her hand on the table, to interrupt their perfect little moment and remind him that she was still his wife, that the ring, which she still wore, meant something. But she didn't move. She just stood there, hidden by the line of people in front of her, watching. She watched him listen intently as the woman spoke. She watched him nod, his expression open and engaged. This was the man she had accused of being distant, of not showing interest. And here he was, giving his undivided attention to a stranger. This was her fault. The realization landed with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. She had done this. She had pushed him away with her careless words, torn him down with her relentless criticism, and now he was moving on, building a new life without her. As if he could feel her gaze, Liam glanced up. His eyes met hers across the crowded room. His smile faded for a heartbeat, but he didn't look angry. He didn't look upset or even awkward. He simply gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a polite acknowledgement, the kind you give a distant acquaintance. Then, he turned his attention back to the woman across from him, back to his coffee, back to his new life. It was the finality of that small gesture that shattered her. It wasn't a dismissal born of anger. It was a dismissal born of indifference. She was already a memory to him, a chapter he had finished reading and put back on the shelf. Chloe turned and walked out of the coffee shop, her own order forgotten. The cool air hit her face, but she barely felt it. The full, crushing weight of her choices settled over her, heavy and suffocating. She had spent so much time and energy picking at his flaws, magnifying his imperfections, that she had been completely blind to the steady, unwavering gift of his love. She had held a treasure in her hands and, in a fit of boredom and pride, had let it slip through her fingers. For the first time in her life, Chloe felt truly, utterly alone. And for the first time, she understood with devastating clarity that it wasn't Liam who had failed their marriage. It was her,